Welcome, Dr. Gobi. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We like to start off by just acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're on, as well as our ancestors and all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We want to acknowledge our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we always stand on as we continue to build and share and work together for a collective liberation. So I want to thank you once again for your leadership, and just go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners.
Sure. So I am Professor Sean Goby. I'm a professor of social innovation and social entrepreneurship at the University of Waterloo and director of the Waterloo Institute for Complexity and Innovation. And we're situated on the Haldimand Tract here, which we now call Waterloo Region, but is originally Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral territory and promised to the Haudenosaunee after the American War of Independence.
Interesting. So can you share what the mission and vision is for WICI, the Institute?
Sure. So WICI is, so our goal is to work with complex systems, often the most challenging and difficult problems that we face as people and societies, the world, economies, and to do it in an approach which works across disciplines, across academic disciplines, across sectors of the economy, because we know that in trying to address those sorts of issues, we can't just assume that any one person, organization, or way of thinking really has all the knowledge you need to be effective in answering those challenges.
Absolutely. So can you share a bit about the origin of your work and how you are disrupting multiple ecosystems here in Canada?
Absolutely. So for myself, I'm building on the backs of some great scholars here at WICI. Dr. Francis Wesley, Dr. Thomas Homer Dixon were both sort of involved in the precursors here. But my kind of journey coming into this space really is a mixture of things. So one, as an academic, I do a lot of research. I'm sort of an economist by training, but I've focused a lot of my work on the economics and the philosophy of community organizing and using or transforming economic systems in ways that can be more impactful, democratic, and all inclusive for a better sense of well-being in society. And I come from that with a background, yes, both as a researcher, but also as a community activist and organizer, and someone with lived experience. I grew up on social assistance and have been precariously housed myself. So a lot of issues about inclusion and economic inclusion are really important to me. So in thinking about a lot of the work that we're doing right now, we're doing a lot of work here locally trying to bridge the university community divide and trying to bring different stakeholders into the classroom and students out of the classroom to work on issues like affordable housing, creating inclusive economies. And on my broader research agenda, we've been doing a lot of work recently on impact investing over the years. So how can we actually transform what finance looks like so that it can have broader community, environmental, and social impact?
I love that. So how important is social innovation and impact investing in your work?
Really critical in a lot of my work. So, and I think it's important to separate those things because social innovation is a really broad umbrella of the ways that people organize to make change in the social, environmental, and economic systems they work within. And I will flag there, not always for the better. There's a lot of very negative social innovations that people undertake as well. I try to be value neutral in the study because I think it gives us a better sense of how it is that that people organize and interact with the world to change or often reinforce systems of power. But when it comes to impact investing as one particular angle on it, or social finance more broadly, I think it's really important to think about what finance does in our society. So one of the things it's very good at doing is aggregating huge amount of resources around big scaled projects. So having access to finance is really critical in how we can mobilize, again, to do big work collectively. And alongside that, there's another thing that finance does. And I think this is something that really exists independent of whether you're talking about a kind of market-based or capitalist system or broader interactions, is that a thing that finance does, whether it does it well or poorly is a different matter. But a key thing that finance does is it allows us to figure out how to allocate resources, to organize ourselves over time. I mean, a mortgage, a 20-year mortgage, is a way of organizing financial resources and human resources around a house for 20 years, which is huge. I mean, that's not something you can easily manage. Just, I'm going to wake up today and decide today's the day that I'm going to help pay off a home. And then maybe tomorrow I won't. We don't change our minds that way when we have financial tools. And those things that restrict our activity allow us to invest in those longer term things and kind of free us to think of things in a bigger scale, longer term visionary way. But of course, we then have to ask questions like, who is it who's deciding what we're investing towards? Who has the power to determine what we prioritize? And I think those are some of the core questions that I think are really interesting when we're talking about social finance, are really those issues of who is at the table, how do they decide where resources are going to go, and what does it end up doing in the world?
Absolutely. So necessary. I'm glad that you were able to break it down that way. Like you said, they are so very different and broad in perspective. What inspires you most about your current model at WICI Consulting?
Yeah, so there's quite a few things. One is that I really like the way that we approach the work, that we're pulling from around the world, but also even just across the campus. I mean, we're based at the University of Waterloo. We have 6 faculties, which are very different in their orientations, and it's really I always find it really inspiring when I'm talking about climate change with an environmental activist and a mathematician and an engineer and a biologist and someone looking at it from a health side of things and someone writing poetry around it. Like, that's really cool. All of those different languages and ways of being involved in really difficult, challenging things, it's mind expanding. I always say that, I'm a professor at a university, and particularly in a place like this, I have no excuse to be bored. I mean, if I feel I'm a little bit bored, I can just go out of my office, walk down the hall, and have a conversation with, one of the most interesting people on the planet. And the thing is, it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet for those interesting people. They're all around me all the time, not just researchers, but also the staff, the students, and the community members we can invite onto campus. So, I mean, I stay inspired by the stories and the conversations that I get to hear day in and day out.
Absolutely. Very inspiring for sure. I'm glad you're able to, mobilize such a dynamic group. Like you said, it would be definitely inspiring. What challenges, barriers do you face in your work, and how are your team working to overcome them?
Yes, it's a good question because there's quite a few. One of the things that I always find both inspiring and disheartening about a university campus is it is abundant. It is overabundant in resources, and the challenge with that is that it is so overabundant with resources that you see them not being deployed around these really interesting challenges. You have a classroom full of bright 20-year-old students who, 50 of them are writing, 3,000 word essays that end up in the garbage and they go nowhere. And so I think that the sheer waste can be really disheartening, and that's at all levels. Like, professional researchers spend 20 years working on a research project that goes in a journal article that no one ever reads outside of 20 other researchers. So I think the amount of brain power, the amount of resourcing that could go into changing the world but isn't, is I think always a consistent barrier and challenge to look at. And I think the other side of it is also there too, which is that these places, I'm a first generation university student, and I tell you, I did not feel welcome here until at a university until well past my first degree, well past my second degree. I mean, some days I have tenure now, and some days I still wonder whether this is a place where I'm welcome. I think that there is so much insight and lived experience and expertise that exists in the communities outside of a university campus that we always seem to have a really hard time inviting in. And um, and we sometimes send out the invites. I send out the invitations all the time. I think I'm better at bringing in outside people than many other scholars. But we're also fighting against a university, which isn't there to make people feel comfortable either. The people who don't come from this background, when they come into university campus, very easy to feel intimidated, confused. And so I find a consistent challenge is trying to figure out how to take this institution and meet people where they're at. And that's hard. It's hard. I have to be humble about that work because I screw that up at a regular basis. So it's hard, it requires humility, and it requires a lot of apologies. And so I think that is a perennial challenge for myself and my work, and trying to instill those values in the team that I work with as well, for us to approach our work from a sense of, humility, grace, and open-mindedness.
I love that. That's remarkable. Do you have a key set of priorities in your work right now that you're working on?
There's a few. So, at its core, I am still a professor. So there's 3 hats I'm supposed to be wearing simultaneously: as a teacher, as a researcher, and as someone who provides service to the broader community. And as a teacher, my key priority is figuring out how it is we can, as students are learning their craft, their skills, their expertise, they often have to learn in very tight disciplinary boundaries, but can we help teach them in a way that keeps them that entrusts them with the skills to do so in a way that is open-minded to other disciplines, so that they can work together with other people who look at problems differently than themselves. And to me, a core priority for that is bringing in community members who are not part of the university into the classroom with those students. Because I think it's much easier to see the complexity and why you need different perspectives when you are face to face with people dealing with the realities, and you're finding out that, oh no, this one policy change or this one mobile phone app, in fact, is not going to be the thing that solves chronic homelessness in our community. I think on the research side, that's very much where my priorities around social finance are. We are right now in the process of the Canadian Social Finance Fund has a program called the Investment Readiness Program. Our team is doing system mapping of the Canadian social finance ecosystem and a principles-focused evaluation of it to really figure out how that ecosystem and the people in it want that ecosystem to be run. So trying to create space for the social finance community in Canada to really better articulate its own voice and be a self-governing, self-managing ecosystem to itself. And so that's the big project. And within it, there's some small projects that I have a priority too. One big one is that I often wonder, for financing, we focus on companies that have essentially investor ownership as the model, a capital-based firm. But how do you look at things like financing and accounting and management structures if it was a worker-owned company or a consumer-owned company or a nonprofit? And I think for me, it's a real priority to figure out how to approach those pieces differently, because I think if we don't do that, then we really limit our imagination in how we organize our economic activity. And in terms of the service, I think it's really about trying to create, WICI and other platforms as places where we can really bring researchers and communities together, so that we can better match, all of this incredible intellect that has skills at asking and answering really interesting questions using really advanced methods, to the people who can actually use those findings to mobilize them. Yes, there's a lot. I mean, it's still, I'd say there's a lot in terms of commercializing an industry that a lot of researchers are doing, but I think we need to think much more broadly than that. We need to think about having research working with policy, working with community organizations, working with activists and organizers and advocates, so that research can actually have its full impact and be shaped by the communities around it, which I think makes for more interesting and compelling research too.
Absolutely, it does. I really love those insights. If we switch gears now, how do you feel about the future of impact investing and social finance in Canada?
Um, it's interesting because I think that I think we are in a really interesting in between place. Um, we in Canada, we often have looked to other parts of the world for how we frame and use the language around social finance. So we've looked to the United Kingdom with big society capital, and there, I would say, is a very, the UK government has really taken a central role in figuring out what that looks like. We look to the United States and the role that some of the big foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation or the Ford Foundation have played towards impact investing have gone, oh, we should take from that there. But the thing is, Canada is neither of those places. And what I see that makes me hopeful is that in a lot of ways, I think it's taken us about 15 years to actually get back to seeing ourselves as our own history and examples. There's a really strong, very deep history of things we would call social finance in Canada in the cooperative movement and things like the Desjardins movement in Quebec or Van City out in British Columbia, and working cooperatives in the prairies and in Atlantic Canada and in the north. And I think that speaks to an actual Canadian tradition of social finance, a quite varied Canadian tradition of social finance. Um, and I think there's more continually bubbling up every day. I mean, think about a lot of informal economic structures of social finance, of just, neighborhood, community, person to person lending. Um, and I think we're starting to see a recognition that, in fact, we shouldn't be just adopting an American or a British model, that there is, in fact, a Canadian model. And it's not just something that we'd be better grounded with doing here, but is also something that where we can be really innovative globally. We've done that in the past. We've just sort of forgotten. I think it's a bit of a colonial hangup of Canada, kind of coast to coast to coast, is that we often think that the best ideas come from somewhere else, and they don't necessarily. I think there's a lot of incredible talent and imagination in Canada that we could contribute to the social finance community globally. We just have to look at ourselves, build a bit of confidence, and do it.
You just have to pull it out of them. Absolutely. And like
Exactly.
you said, the universities are so full of resources, but it's just what do we do with it, right? That's definitely why we created this space to, amplify the
Really.
voice of people and being respectful of your time. This one last question, I'll wrap it all together. What is your ultimate goal with WICI, and what does success look like to you and your colleagues? And if you have any closing thoughts and calls to action for the community, please share those as well.
Sure. For me, my ultimate goal for WICI is to create spaces for us to reimagine what post-secondary education looks like in Canada and around the world. To create spaces where we can think of those key pieces of research and teaching and service in ways which don't set universities as an ivory tower apart from the communities, but actually creating more connections with communities so that there's more co-creation and co-learning for ourselves and also for those that we serve. Um, so in terms of calls to action, not just in terms of impact investing and social finance, but more broadly around working complex issues, I would encourage anyone who is currently involved in the post-secondary education sector to look at our work at WICI, sign up to our newsletter, look at our website, and stay informed and get engaged, because we aren't just a Waterloo community. We are really a national and an international community. I would say for those who are outside of that, look to us and look to other universities and push on them to be more engaged in their communities, and trust your own experiences as people who provide service in your communities, as organizers, as activists, as good citizens, to use your imagination and push that forward. Don't rely on us. We're here to help, hopefully, but it's your energy, your vibrancy, and your creativity that really drives these spaces forward.
Thank you so much. And again, we really appreciate your remarkable work and leadership. So thank you so much for that, and appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. And we're just going to close off as we started by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're on, as well as our ancestors, the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we do this work and build and share for our collective liberation. So thank you once again, Dr. Geobey. We appreciate all that you do and taking the time to be here today.
Thank you very much.